So basically, there's a lot that goes into it. I think the most important part is good characters, believable characters. So you have to start with a protagonist, with somebody with a story to tell, and then you put that person into a period of conflict, a problem. They hit upon something that upsets their world, throws their universe upside down. If you look at any book that, or any short story that you've read, you'll see that at some point their little happy universe somehow gets thrown into chaos. So what I did in my story is, I started with, my original intention was that the book should be for a younger audience. So I wanted my protagonist to be a young girl. So I started with a 13-year-old girl. And I figured, okay, how can I do this? So I have her be an orphan. So she's orphan now. She's her parents were from the Danish West Indies, and they moved to Panama, and they died there. And so she has to come back, and she has to live with her aunt, who never married and has a very bad temper. So here she's in a position of being, wow, I'm thrown out of my home, out of my great environment, and I'm put into an environment of a place that I don't know, living with people that I'm not familiar with or comfortable with. And then how do we make a story, and how do we bring it into the transfer? So I thought a great deal about this, and I understood that in those days, Germany had what was called U-boats, which are submarines that would basically go around the world torpedoing any ship that they thought was aiding their enemies. Even if it was a passenger ship, if they thought there were guns or ammunition or even food for the enemy, they would torpedo it and sink it. And they did this to hundreds of ships all over the Atlantic, anywhere that they thought where ships were coming from Africa or from the Caribbean or from North America, from Canada, bringing supplies to the British or to the French, they would sink them. So I thought, well, what if I took somebody from a U-boat, a German, put him on this island that's a neutral Danish island, neutral meaning safe territory for a person of any national origin during a time of war, and now we're going to put this island in a turmoil situation. The island is going to go from being neutral Danish to being American and potentially dangerous territory. So I decided, I contrived and I found ways where I got this German U-boat officer onto this island using historically accurate information, so nothing is completely pulled out of the air. It's all historically accurate. So I got this character on the island, and by working it around, I got those two characters, the girl, the young girl, to meet this German soldier. Both need each other in a way. She doesn't have family. She doesn't feel needed. She doesn't feel that she's doing anything or accomplishing. There's no school for her. It only goes up to 6th grade. She's already past that. So she really has, her life is kind of in turmoil. So she meets this German soldier, and he needs help. He doesn't have his family. He doesn't have his country. He doesn't have money. He doesn't have anything. So she helps him. And the story is about how they survive together in an increasingly hostile situation, in a situation that gets increasingly more difficult. You see, as a writer, to make the story interesting and bring in suspense, you have to tighten the screws. You have to bring in situations which puts the characters in peril, in turmoil. So how did I do that? So I contrived a situation where his presence is found out by other Germans on the island, who are really supposedly working incognito, but everybody knows they're helping their country by supplying German cruisers and German raiders and wiring Berlin about enemy ship movement. So they're helping their own country conduct a war, essentially from this little neutral island, which under the laws of neutrality is a no-no. You're not supposed to use a neutral country to help your country fight the war. So so what happens is that I use the German spy character to blackmail the good German soldier character into committing acts of sabotage, and he gets into trouble, increasingly into greater trouble, until all of a sudden you have transfer day, the Americans take over, and now he's in really hot water. So that's how I kind of you know, every story has increasing conflict until it reaches that climax point where the intensity increases, everyone's life is kind of in total chaos, and then you kind of resolve it. You bring it to a resolution, and then finally, hopefully, a satisfying conclusion that satisfies everybody. So that's basically the gist of the story, and I did it all under using the historical data from Transfer Day, and using some of the real characters that existed, like the governor, and some society characters that I brought in, and some local characters who bring a lot of local color to the whole story. In those days, the steamships they needed coal in those days. So they used to come to port, and they didn't have a mechanical means to put the coal in the coal chutes. They used human labor. Women would lift up 100-pound baskets of coal on their heads and go up the gangplank to the steamer's chute and drop the coal into the steam chute, into the coal chute. And they did this sometimes 200 times a day. And they got a penny for each basket that they brought. It was a very difficult situation. So I brought in a famous character actually from this period, and I brought her in as a character as well to just show the full types of characters that existed in this time. And would you want me to read?
Yes, please.
So in this scene that I'm going to read for you, it's a scene with the girl, the young girl, whose name is Abby, and the German soldier that she's trying to help. He's being pursued by the other German spies. They want to use him for a very nefarious purpose, which I made up in my head. Didn't really happen. Because I had to make it interesting for the reader. So I came up with a scenario that the Germans want the German soldier character to shoot the Danish governor to scare away the Americans, so that the Germans can come in and take over the islands. Because that's ultimately what was the main problem, was that the Americans had something called the Monroe Doctrine, which meant that no other European powers could come into the New World, Western Hemisphere, and take over any other countries. The Americans did not feel comfortable with other European powers. So they had this doctrine that they would not allow. So any European country that was not already here with a colony could not come in. But Germany had designs on the Panama Canal. So they had a real legitimate reason for taking over these Danish islands. So I contrived in my head that the Germans would ask this guy order him, blackmail him to shoot the Danish governor, and cause an international incident, make it look like there's a riot on the island, and scare away the Americans, and Germany could come sailing in. So I'll just read for you a short scene where the Germans are now tightening the screws and trying to get him to do their will.